computer?
And
Okay, and we're on record.
All right. Well, welcome to the presentation on ecological restoration at Eggers Grove, also known as Eggers Woods. And the picture you're seeing, finally, down there, is one of the groves at Eggers. This is the oak grove between the South Pavilion, and you can see the caretakers building in the photo, the brick caretakers building. It's a lovely oak grove with picnic tables in it. Great place to picnic, as are both our North and South Pavilions. And recently, the Forest Preserve District of Cook County has begun what they call their land acknowledgement, and they give credit to the tribes that were here and acknowledge the fact that, you know, people were living here before European settlement. And so this is their statement, and they encourage us to use it. So I'm including it. And actually, when you meet with Forest Preserve staff, you know, at tours and other things, they will read that first paragraph. And so they give credit particularly to the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi tribes, you know, for their taking care of the land here for centuries. The picture below is swamp thistle, Circia muticum, and this is a thistle which was actually featured in an article, front page article of the Chicago Tribune, I think a couple months ago. Kristen Pink was the district ecologist who talked about how excited she was that they were finding this at one of their restoration sites. And we restore for plants like this. This is a highly conservative species. We have several stands of it at Eggers. Okay, the site. Eggers is bordered at the north, so north is at the top of this picture, is bordered on the north at 112th Street and runs down to where the arrow is 118th Street. And this is the area under active restoration. So it's about 250 acres. It's owned by the Forest Preserves. It is completely within the city of Chicago, and particularly the Chicago's East Side neighborhood. And in fact, Michael, your house is probably one of those houses in this photo here, someplace. This is the northern portion of a natural area that stretches for 4 miles off of 112th Street down to the city border. And it also includes the state park, Powers State Park, as well as Powderhorn Nature Preserve and Prairie. The eastern border this is as far east as you can go in Illinois. It is the border with Indiana. And what you can see here is the dune and swale topology on this map. The blue on the map is water. So those are our marshes, and you can see the land in between. And so you're actually looking at a bird's eye view of land and swale topology here. And our marshes used to drain south into Wolf Lake, which is not on this picture, but they were cut off, and that's something we'll be talking about later. If you come out to our marshes, you will see what look like hundreds of dead trees, and most of those are green ash, and they were killed by the emerald ash borer. The arrow shows what amounts to a line of demarcation. It is where there used to be a train track. Now there are power lines and a slag road. And above that road is where the diversity of the site really resides. And south of it, well, let's just say south of it is where the possibilities are. And people picnic, hike, cycle, and bird watch here. It is a priority site for the Forest Preserve District. They are focusing a lot of contractor work here, very, very effective contractor work. But it's a priority site because it was never logged, or rather it was logged, but never farmed. And it was, because it was never farmed, the soil in that, particularly in that dune area, was not disturbed as much as so many of the surrounding areas, and you still find a lot of plant diversity. Okay, so it was probably purchased around the 1930s, and we have remnants of activity past. So we've got ghost ball fields. If you look at that top picture of that, I think that's a willow, you can see metal posts. And that was the backstop for home base for a ball field that used to be located on that dune. You can also, if you check in the same area, you will find concrete pads there. And those concrete pads were pavilions, and I'm told they were dance pavilions. You'll also find stanchions, concrete stanchions for as far as roads used to go. So there's all kinds of signs of previous activity, which the district no longer supports because it is doing a much bigger scale of restoration, through the area. And the preserve was defined on the western edge with a train. What is now the Burnham Greenway used to be a train track, and that kind of band through the middle of the preserve was also a train. And in fact, Michael's book, Over the Line, has pictures of a train on a track when there still was a track there, dumping slag right there to fill the marsh south of that track. I should have put that picture in here, Michael. And when you go to the extreme southern end, when you cross the power lines, and which is now where the track used to be, and you continue walking into our southern portion of the site, what you can see are remnants of the Nike missile site. And especially if you look at a satellite map, you can see rectangles, very unnatural rectangles for the area. Those are the ghost sections of the Nike missile site. Okay, so for previous restoration activities, first of all, Eggers is part of a countywide effort. Over 44,000 volunteer hours were contributed across the entire county in 2019. They've got 90 restoration sites. Eggers is one of them. As I said, Eggers is considered a priority site. We do have management plans for every site. I work with Dan Spencer, our regional ecologist. And so this is not helter-skelter work that we're doing in the forest preserves. We work with district staff. And as I say, John Pasterik has been the steward here for 12 years. I joined probably about 4 years ago. And he's been in charge of removal of the woody invasives, the buckthorn and the honeysuckle, which generally get removed in fall, winter, and early spring. He's been in charge of the herbaceous invasives removal. So that's our garlic mustard, that's our white sweet clover. And those plants, the non-woody plants, are removed in spring and summer when they're growing. And he holds monthly work days. They're second Saturdays of the month, September through June. So generally we would hold 10 work days a year. John never wanted to hold them in July and August because he said the mosquitoes were fierce. So we've changed that since, but we just deal with the mosquitoes. There's been a lot of work here that was contracted out. So contractors are doing a lot at the behest of the Forest Preserve District itself. So the Forest Preserve, for instance, has put in a drainage system on our East Marsh. Because it was cut off from the Wolf Lake, which it normally drained into, it had turned into a big bathtub, and it was collecting so much water, it made the environment much more hospitable for some really aggressive invasives, whereas our natives were fading along the shore because the water was getting maybe a little too deep for them. So that system was completed last year. And there's been major clearing of the very large woody invasive species. So the district has been clearing out things like the non-native mulberry, trees of heaven, Siberian elm, enormous honeysuckle that had grown 15, 18 feet tall, an enormous buckthorn, among some of the stuff they've been taking out. They've also taken out things like the cottonwood, which were absorbing too much water in the West Marsh, and throwing too much shade for the marsh species that had been there. Let's see, they also take charge of what amounts to significant herbiciding of the very large stands we had of purple loosestrife, and things like common reed, Phragmites, and reed canary grass, among others. They also, in the areas which really have been cleared of some of these major invasives, they have had, I'm not sure if it was Green Corps or some other group, come out and plant along the eastern shore of the marsh. So they're restoring some of the sedges and other plants that were there before the waters got too high, and the invasives got too big. There is Plants of Concern monitoring. Now, Plants of Concern is a group that is based at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and they actually monitor plants of concern. So those are the plants that are threatened and endangered, or otherwise perhaps rather rare, that we do want to save, and we still might be able to save. I actually was a Plant of Concern monitor. Terry, I don't know if you also did this work for them, but it's a very rigorous day-long training session. Their data recording is quite extensive, and they make you sign a confidentiality agreement. So you can't tell anybody what you were monitoring or where you were monitoring it. They really, it needs to be kept under wraps for many good reasons. And besides the Botanic Garden and doing that monitoring, the Field Museum really contributes to restoration activities here. Mighty Acorns, Earth Force, and Kimby, Calumet is my backyard, are three agencies which bring students out. Mighty Acorns are the youngest students, Earth Force are middle school, and Kimby are high school students. They come out to actually engage in restoration work, cutting buckthorn and honeysuckle, sampling the water, and of course taking nature walks so that they know what it is that they are helping save. And the Field Museum with Isa Redlinski has also been doing seed collection, sponsoring seed collection work days on the south side. And so we collect more seed than we would otherwise, thanks to their activities. And I see I missed BioBlitz. Many years ago, we, to just determine, to do a baseline study of what was in Eggers, Eggers was part of a regional BioBlitz. And so I had, when I first started at Eggers, a basic list of species found. And I've been contributing to that list. Okay, so that's previous restoration activities. Okay, and so what are the challenges, current challenges? Dumping, graffiti, litter, invasives, critters, and abrupt change, I'll call it abrupt change here, and poaching. So we have to address these issues. And the picture I have here with the arc, under the arc, where it looks beautifully green and hopeful, that's really an enormous stand of lilies of the valley. And that is going to have to be removed. This will probably be done by district contractors applying herbicide to that. All right, first challenge, dumping. We have a little bit of everything in Eggers. And these pictures were all taken from the good portion of the site. I'm not even in the portion south of the railroad tracks here. So there is still a large concrete pile, and on previous work days, we've been actually working to take those concrete chunks out of the good woodland and set them up along the road. So this was actually not in the woodland per se, but along the road, to have the Forest Preserve come and take them away at some point in the future when we're finally done taking the concrete chunks out of the woodland, so we can put what really belongs there back. in our West Marsh, as I discovered this previous fall, when all the water had dissipated because it was fall and it was dry, and so the marshes naturally dry out, we have a dinghy. I'm going to have to carefully remove that because there's a lot of good plants growing in that marsh, and so I still have to figure out exactly how I'm going to do that. Down at Powderhorn to the south, they can best me that dinghy. They have a 1950s truck sitting in their marsh, and they have decided that they are not removing it because they would do too much damage to their environment trying to get that truck out. But I have a dinghy, and I think I will be able to get it out some dry fall. You can see the tire there. And I think the last picture is railroad ties along the shore of my East Marsh. And I have no idea how, if those really are railroad ties, how they would have gotten that far in, unless, again, there was conscientious dumping. We have graffiti problems. The district does supply graffiti remover. And so on hard surfaces like that stanchion that's marked with the P, I have that is clean now. There are no remnants of that red paint. But I'm going to have to paint over on the wood. So the district will supply paint, and we'll go through and paint over the graffiti. I have already painted probably 8 or 9 trees. This is a problem overall, and it seemed that with COVID last year, somehow more people were in the forest preserves and there was more graffiti, I'm told, overall. Next challenge, litter. Well, we were discussing this a little bit, Terry, a little bit earlier. So someone tried to burn pictures of their, I guess, their old girlfriend up in the top right-hand corner. I have found jackets, I have found pants, I have found gloves. I even found a child's left shoe skate in the preserve. And above this jacket here is an arrow. I'm told that's not one to worry about because that was a practice arrow. It does not have a blade on it. And then there's the regular trash that I just to get a picture, I decided to walk into the preserve and pick up trash for 40 minutes. And this is what I picked up. What you don't see are the beer bottles at the bottom of that Jewel Osco bag. You can see the broken glass in the cup, but it's really the plastic that we try to pick up. You know, sometimes if I'm picking up trash, I will pass by paper trash knowing that paper is going to disintegrate, and I just get the plastic. Next challenge, the invasives. That picture with the bike path, which is really a lovely green picture, shows you the extent of the mugwort that is growing along the trail. It is everywhere. We're going to have to deal with it. The picture below the mugwort, the arrow is pointing to purple loosestrife. The purple loosestrife is something contractors have been taking, care of for years. It was set back during the construction of the drainage marsh because for, I think it was 1 year, I don't think it was 2 years, they were not able to get in there to control the purple loosestrife. And so billions of seeds were created and fell to the marsh, into the marsh. And so we're controlling a lot of purple loosestrife again. And the picture with the road shows you, actually that was the construction road, and under that road is pretty much the drainage pipe leading up to 112th Street to control the water in our East Marsh. And I include this picture not because it's, well, the road was invasive, but we are now going to have to plant that road over just to control the invasives from invading that road and having a lot of, say, too much weedy goldenrod growing right there. All right, next challenge, critters. We have beaver. So you can see the beaver damage up there in the upper right-hand corner. And the picture adjacent to it shows that same tree, but this aspect shows you that that tree is actually over the bird walking path along the East Marsh. So we have since had the district come out and take that tree down. Beavers know how to cut a tree off, but their engineering instincts don't always tell them how to properly fell it. And so when this happens, we need to have the district come in and bring those trees down so no one gets hurt. The picture in the lower right-hand corner shows you the extent of the beaver damage. This is along our West Marsh, and every one of the downed trees is an oak, and every one of them was taken down by beaver. In fact, the beaver have taken out at least 100, 120 trees at Eggers. The green picture shows you the damage that deer can do. This was a gorgeous stand of bloodroot. I only have 2 at Eggers, and the deer took out probably 100 plants. I stopped counting at 100, so there were more plants. So this is the kind of activity that we have to learn to live with, try to prevent. That's another challenge. And then I call it abrupt change, but it's really land abuse. In the picture to the left, someone must have taken a dirt bike through Eggers and came very close to some very, very conservative plants, wiping out some conservative plants. Fortunately, they missed them. We have problems at Eggers with cyclists, and we have to try to prevent cyclists from creating new trails through the preserve, because what is there in most cases, is really priority plantings, and we're really biologically diverse, and we're really trying to save it. And a true abrupt change, Terry, you were talking about Jarvis Bird Sanctuary and the trees that had been felled. Eggers also recently has had a lot of downed trees in our good woodland. And what you're looking at are oak and mostly basswood that were felled by, it had to have been a microburst or some really high wind. And what's growing on those trees, because obviously this picture was taken in growing season, the trees came down, and along the tree bases, you can see the green. There's really, the arrow is pointing out, actually stands of false Solomon seal, there's bellwort, there's a lot of good plants growing there. And I'm thinking that what we should do is try to move them to some of the areas that have been cleared, just to give them a chance to grow, because they're going to die. The soil is going to wash away from those root balls, and those plants are going to wither and die. The deer are poached. And although I would like fewer deer, I do not want unregulated, poaching of them. And recently the Forest Preserve District has set up, there is an officer who was, I think, in charge of poaching. And when we're talking poaching, of course, we're not just talking deer and their antlers, we're talking plants. So that empty box there is for, shows the poaching of plants, most of which I don't want to name because, well, they actually, in terms of, I do have a poaching story. I have several poaching stories, but I'll tell one of my poaching stories. And it was that there was some TV personality who also has a website who went into a forest preserve site to pick onions and explained that, oh, these are really good to eat, and this is how you can find them and everything. And so, and I heard this from a police officer, this story. And so the police found out about this guy and his website. And of course, with the website, they had him dead to rights. So they hauled him in court, told him $500 fine, and he paid it. And he was made to take that part of his website down. I don't know if he apologized as well. But poaching is a definite problem in the preserves. For years, the Forest Preserve District would not participate in that plants of control program, concern program run by the Botanic Garden, because they feared any news getting out at all about their conservative species. They've since changed their policies. Okay, the current work. We continue to remove buckthorn and honeysuckle, and I'm probably going to be moving to that area south of the power lines. We remove garlic mustard. We mentioned the mugwort, the lily of the valley, the purple loosestrife. I have not mentioned the field thistle and the bull thistle, but we do have problems with those plants, and we will be dealing with those this summer. Phragmites and reed canary grass, that's mostly left to the contractors. We do monitoring. I have a frog monitor. I have a bird monitor. We do monitor plants at Eggers. And I just recently got a dragonfly monitor. I'm very happy about that. And current work does mean removal of litter, as well as the concrete and tires, and eventually that dinghy. We believe that this year we may be putting up fencing. The district has supplied me with fencing. And regarding the beaver, I walked the eastern shore, or the shoreline there along our East Marsh with Dan Spencer. I walked the path. And Dan and I agreed that the beaver could have all of the trees between that path and the marsh. But anything west of that path, we could fence. So we could save the oak trees and save the woodland, but it had to be the part of it west of the path. So we will probably be doing that work this summer. Seed collection. We did collect 57 different species last year at Eggers. And Eggers is actually, since it's a priority site, the district is not letting us, for the time being, include accept seed from other sites. But if we have a lot of seed, a lot of bottle brush, for instance, certain other grasses, we can share them with other sites. We can give those seeds away. And then there's the planting that I had referred to. The district sometimes does mass plantings like they did along our East Marsh shore. And then I'm hoping to save some of the plants on those root balls that were of the trees that were blown over. And the pictures here show you a native rose. We have at least two different kinds of native roses. We have Rosa satigera, Illinois native rose, and we have probably Rosa Carolina. It's a shorter, much shorter prairie rose. That Illinois rose, we have a bush that stands probably 7 feet high and 7 feet across at Eggers. The picture of the seeds, that is an open swamp milkweed pod. And you can see that it's about to lose a few seeds there. That picture was taken last fall. And I had to include this picture someplace because I like it so much. That is a mud dauber wasp home built on the side of an invasive thistle, which I should have pulled. I didn't, though, because I couldn't bring myself to destroy this guy's little house. So what I did was just cut off the flowers. Okay, these are more pictures of current work. Basically, when you remove the woody growth, what you're trying to do is bring sunlight again to the ground, and that is not going to happen when you've got as much brush as is showing in the bottom right-hand picture. So a previous workday removed a portion of the brush. We're still working on this edge. But the top pictures show what amounts to a champion buckthorn. You can see my boot up there in the corner to give you some perspective. I wear a size 8 boot, size 8 women's boot. Take a look at that buckthorn. That was probably 40 to 45 inches in diameter. And the picture off to the left shows that buckthorn. It has fallen over, but it has not died. It continues to grow, and it probably, even on its side there in the growth, probably reaches 20 feet in the air. it's a huge, that will come out this year. I guarantee that will come out this year at a work day. And then the picture in the bottom left-hand corner, that is garlic mustard. That is what we are currently pulling. We will be working on that for the next few weeks. It is still viable to pull it. Okay, for the future. So what I've just described are a lot of our standard activities at Eggers, but I would love to get a drone to document the changes in the marsh and the vegetation. It means, and I think some of these things could be high school and scout groups that are willing to commit to, activities over a period of time. We have 3 witness trees someplace on our site, or we had 3 witness trees. They're probably gone now. But the Morton Arboretum took the land surveys from the 1830s and 40s that were done in this area, and they mapped all of what were called the witness trees, the tree markings in the various plats from these surveys, these land surveys, and they've mapped them onto the current topology of the Chicago area. So I know where there are 3 witness trees. I have not yet gone to those areas to specifically look for a tree or its remnants, but I think that would be a great project for a group, to just go and see what's there. We will be doing prescribed burns through the woodlands and through the marshes. When you open up an area, oftentimes, so for instance, in one of the areas we've opened up, we have a lot of very small poplar trees. In another area, there's a lot of small buckthorn. But there's also a lot of fuel nearby, which is, if we can spread the grasses into these cleared areas fast enough and get a burn through there fast enough, we will be able to control the woody species we don't want. And for those interested, the Forest Preserve used to give a 2-day course on being a burn crew member. And so I am a certified burn crew member. I've taken the course and I can participate in one of those prescribed burns. I would like to set up apps that are self-guided tours of the site and the various, just the aspects of the site. And one of them would be of the Nike missile site. I think it might bring a little bit of attention to the area that combines it with the Calumet Stewardship Initiative, which is trying to combine the history along with the natural ecology and shows how these things coexisted or competed with each other in the Calumet region. The area where the dumping was done, so the Dolomite Prairie creation, where the dumping was done at the southern portion of the site where the road was created, there's been research that shows that that slag is very similar to the substrata of Dolomite prairies. And there are some research and there's some activity someplace in the region to see if they can reconstruct Dolomite prairies on some of these wasted areas. And so I've already signed up. I would like to see that at Eggers, if we can start doing that around the power lines. The deer, because they poach, or the deer, because they eat a lot of our really good species, prevent those species from flowering and setting seed. And so one way of getting seed to try to get these plants in there nonetheless would be to set up native plant seed gardens. And I have one prototype going with one of my very regular volunteers who is growing the seed of 3 species that we never get seed for at Eggers because of the plants being eaten by the deer. And then for any volunteers who really, really get into this stuff, there's a whole group of certifications and specializations that they can specialize in that would help our preserve. And the picture here shows swamp milkweed with the butterfly on it. So this is what swamp milkweed looks like when in growing season, as opposed to the previous fall picture that I had. That lobelia, which is the blue spike in the corner, that is a spike of lobelia that is 4 feet tall, which is probably my only spike. It was my only spike that year that tall. Normally they don't get that tall because they get eaten by the deer. And in the bottom left-hand corner is early meadow rue, which is a great plant because it has male and female flowers. And you're looking at the male flowers here. This is another plant which the deer chew so that I don't get seeds. So that's one of the plants in the garden, the native plant seed garden right now. Oh, and this is a list of all of the certifications you can get. At the bottom, I show you, well, I'm a commercial not-for-hire applicator. I have passed 2 tests given by the Illinois Department of Agriculture so that I can apply herbicide to stumps of buckthorn and honeysuckle, and I will also apply it to other things. But I wanted to include the picture, the green picture. We call that Kimby Grove. The Kimby students had been out there so often that Dan Spencer and I informally refer to the area they've been working at. We've named it for them. So that's Kimby Grove. And finally, questions or comments by anyone. The pictures here, that's a columbine. That's our native columbine. Again, I'm lucky when I get these pictures because that's another plant that the deer eat. And that belongs in a native garden, plant garden, so that we can collect seed. The picture right under the comments is spiderwort, and that is one the deer don't eat. And this summer, we will need volunteers to pick the seed we have in a prairie, recently restored prairie, to help fill in those ruts that were part of the construction site. And that would be a good plant for it. And finally, below, this is a picture of that native rose bush that we have. Really beautiful in bloom. And behind it, you can see the power lines and the state of Indiana. If you were standing there, you could also hear the Indiana toll road. Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Oh, I can't hear you guys. Wait.
No, Mike was still
There.
muted. That's all.
Okay.
Now I'm okay. Thanks, Marianne.
Sure.
So I was just wondering if, there's one question from about the, if you mentioned the poison ivy.
No, well, actually, that's a good thing. I should have a slide called hazards, because we do have poison ivy. In fact, when people that I see, because I talk to anybody who wants to talk to me while I'm out there, I'll talk to them. And sometimes I will just walk up to people in summer who are in shorts and sandals and are venturing into some of the wooded areas. And I will ask them if they know what poison ivy looks like. And most of the time they don't. We have to work in areas, and so I tell them, you stay out of there, and they thank me, and they do. But when we're working in these areas, it's one of the reasons why we strongly recommend, demand is probably too strong a word, strongly recommend that people wear closed-toe shoes, they have to wear long pants, and we recommend long sleeves, because you can wash the poison ivy off of your clothes. We also, I keep a bottle of Tecnu in our work pod, our work shed that we have for our tools and other supplies. And I offer it to people if they believe they've been hit with poison ivy. Tecnu is a product that you can buy at Walgreens. And I tell people about it just in case they brush up against it. I do have pictures of poison ivy growing on trees. So it's not only on the ground that people have to watch for it, but you could be slapped in the face by a leaf and not realize that it's poison ivy growing up a tree. We also have plants with lots of thorns. Buckthorn, yeah, buckthorn has thorns, but there is nothing as bad as catbrier. I mean, it just catches you. The catbrier, the thorns on black raspberries. So yes, we have various hazards. Thank you for that. I will add a slide called hazards. So what the intrepid volunteers need to deal with. Let me make a note of that.
Okay, and Marianne, I'll volunteer to collect seeds from spiderwort because it's all along the bike path, and I love it. I have some growing in our backyard, and so as I ride along the bike path, if I when it's time, I'll stop and collect the seeds for you. And
well, thank you. We also have it, if you want to experience the prairie, the district cleared a lot of the invasive woody species out of the far northwest corner. And the reason they did that was they had discovered a lot of good prairie species in there. One of them is spiderwort, and when the spiderwort is blooming, it is gorgeous because it's just all over in the prairie. And it's actually kind of tricky to collect the seed. You think the pod isn't ready, and then all of a sudden you go back and the seeds have dropped. But we'll be persistent about it, and we'll get it this year.
Okay, and maybe I can talk to you a little bit more about it too, because I'm not sure exactly when to pick the seeds. Because
oh, sure.
And I picked them one year and spread them around, and some of them took. So I did it at the right time on that occasion. But we'll just talk more about it.
Sure.
So are there other questions? I don't want to dominate. Well, thanks, Marianne, for your presentation, and I'm glad we had some difficulties initially, but we got it working. So,
Terry, you were the perfect person to have today. Thank you so much.
Well, that's not a problem.
so
Have you stopped recording, Mike?
I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good idea about adding a slide about poison ivy particularly.
Yeah.